Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career. Tracey Saenz is the principal and co-founder of Social Currency, a marketing agency that helps David brands compete against Goliaths. For the past 20 years, Tracey has taken innovative brands to market, both in the B2B and B2C space, from startups to Fortune 100 companies. She's on a mission to proliferate innovation by removing the roadblocks that face David brands as they compete against Goliaths. Here are 4 main points that I'd like for you to take away from this episode. The first is the simple frameworks startups can use to face uncertainty. Second are the tools that you can use to address all the key decision makers in your B2C and B2B buyer's journey. The third is how to empower new decision influencers at the end of a decision for a B2B sale. And lastly, questions to ask when creating metrics at different points of your sales process.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So one of the things when I bring people onto the podcast, I always ask them, what's your mission? And there were 2 key words that you mentioned in your mission. And I want to talk about that here first. Before we dive into the journey of the story, I want to dive into that main point because it kind of hit me pretty hard. You talked about proliferate innovation. Proliferating innovation. I think that's pretty compelling with what you do in the branding world. So can you elaborate a little bit more about what you meant by those 2 key power words?
Sure. So what I've kind of discovered in my journey, working with a lot of startups, is there's tons of innovation in the world, and a lot of it never makes it to people because of a lack of commercialization, a lack of success in commercialization, and really on the execution side. So, that's really what inspires us is if we can help these really innovative companies just execute better on commercialization, marketing, sales, go-to-market strategy, then we could help more innovation get to the world.
I love that. What's your favorite part when working with startups or smaller companies? Because you focus on the Davids versus the Goliaths, and I love the way that you put that. So when you're working with these David brands, what is your favorite part when it comes to helping them and commercializing and going to market?
I think the most key piece is learning about the customer. So I want everybody I work with to be customer obsessed. So not only understanding the problem that the customer experiences that company is solving through their offering, but the whole context around how they experience that offering. And that's going to drive so much of what the company does in sales and marketing.
So not just customer intake. So this goes past just personas, right? It's going a little deeper.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of personas, but it's also, where is the customer when they experience this problem? Where do they go for information? How do they experience it? That is going to inform so much of your marketing plan, and it's going to just make it your spend and your efforts much more efficient.
Interesting. And when we're focused, obviously customer centric is going to be key, number one, in your messaging, but also getting those data points and feedback loops when you're working with customers. What are some of the things that you see? I mean, with startups, what's this type of startup that you work with? What's the size or the company valuation?
It's really across the board. So it's generally somebody that's launching into an area of some uncertainty. So that is a lot of times pretty early stage startups that have a little bit of funding to actually do some marketing.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's larger companies that are launching a new product line, for example. Or some companies, a lot of times we'll get some companies that have been successful, somewhat successful, but maybe they didn't kind of put together those building blocks in the first place. So they've kind of operated on instinct. They had a lot of industry knowledge, but they need to go back and refine their target markets, their customer segmentation, and come up with some more concrete goals and objectives, and then understand how to measure those going forward.
And I like how you mentioned that when you're facing uncertainty, and even when I work with my own clients, like there's either new initiatives or new uncharted territories. What are some of the tools or some of the, I would say, frameworks that you use in order to face uncertainty with at least some bit of certainty, or have more information? So you're treading the water, but you're also not going in and then sinking.
Yeah. It's really common for us when we go into a startup, we're working with super smart people, right? And they know this sense that they need to have goals. They need to, understand their customer, and they're looking at market trends. There's just a lot of information and an endless number of metrics that you could capture. But my job is to come in and kind of simplify that. So what I first look at is, has this company validated product market fit yet? Or are there any questions around that? So again, going back to who exactly is my customer? How do they experience the problem? We'll know if we have customer fit if there's some traction in the product. If they don't have that, there are certain tests I would want to run to find that. Because if you don't have product market fit, the money that you spend on marketing is going to be a little all over the place.
Yeah.
It's just not, you're going to waste a lot of money.
It's going to amplify that gap of product market fit. You're going to bleed.
Yeah, exactly. So once they have product market fit, then we say, okay, what step is limiting your growth? So we go look at the funnel. First, at the top of the funnel, are you putting out a message that's resonating with the target market? Like when people see that ad for whatever your offer is or whatever your message is about the problem, are people clicking on that and wanting more? Usually that's probably more often the problem. That's the most common place to work on is refining the message to really get to the value prop.
Yeah.
And the problem that the person is experiencing and how they're experiencing it. And then we can look at middle of funnel. So, another common issue is we've got lots of middle of the funnel content about like why our product is so great, how it differs from the competition, et cetera. But at the top of the funnel, we're not really educating users about the issue. We're talking about just the problem itself.
The problem itself. Okay.
So we're talking more about the solution than the problem. So they haven't even gotten there yet, middle of funnel or bottom of funnel could be an issue too. So maybe we're getting tons of people in, but then all of a sudden when we're making the close, they drop off. Maybe new decision makers are entering and we haven't made a business case to we hadn't even know that other people are influencing this decision. So we look at do some, funnel diagnostics to figure out, and you can kind of compare to some benchmarks in the industry to figure out, which one has the most problems that we can fix.
Absolutely. You attack those first and you work backwards from where you're at. Now, you said something pretty interesting when it comes to attention as well as decision making. So attention is the most, I think, lucrative equity in the world, but it's so hard to get, like to buy attention. But when it comes to that, when you have attention, now you need to help facilitate decision making if it's for a specific innovative product or a brand or a consumer product, right? So what are some of the ways that you analyze all the decisions that consumers need to make or for your specific product? Because I think that's kind of like that's more diving deeper in consumer psychology.
Sure. So there's a couple different tools I would use. The decision-making process is generally going to be more complex, the more expensive the product and service offering is. So for instance, a B2B company generally has a more complex buying decision. They need more tools to justify that decision than say a consumer product like a new lipstick or something that's like kind of somewhat impulse purchase and more based on brand than the decision. So a couple things on the consumer side, we would use like a consumer activity journey. So that kind of maps out, you know, and again, going back to really knowing your customer, what are all the things that a customer does when interacting with your market segment, essentially? Like they might be talking to a friend, going to the internet, they might have seen an Instagram friend talk about something. So you can kind of create a map and then what channels that they're interacting with on that journey. And you want to think about it in terms of questions and answers. So what questions does the consumer have? Whether or not they would call it a question, they may not, but questions, concerns, what's going on in their mind that you can answer for them. And that could be from a brand standpoint or like even like product features and benefits, that kind of thing. On the B2B side, I would use something more like a buyer's journey, which maps the buyers going from becoming aware of a problem, figuring out how to solve it, and they might have many ways to solve it. So solving it doesn't necessarily mean buying a product. Solving a problem could be hiring someone, it could be, you know, doing nothing, it could be trying to work hard or whatever. It's a number of ways. And then you want to kind of, the earlier you can be part of their journey, the better. And then, you know, you take them from awareness to education, education of the issue, and then education of the various ways to solve that problem and why your offering is the best way. So for B2B sales, especially in the end of the decision, we find that a lot of times new decision influencers are appearing. So we like to use the challenger sale a lot, which helps salespeople and marketing identify their mobilizer within the organization, and it helps them create a business case for all the other influencers who may not necessarily be the one adopting that service offering, but they, or product offering,
influencing.
But they're in. So like this, the CTO is going to care about how secure the offering is, for example. The finance person is going to care about cost, you know, and cost over time, et cetera, and to make that business case for each persona.
No, absolutely. And for listeners right now, that might sound like extremely overwhelming, especially if you're a small team or a one-person show. But I want to break it down because there's so much intricacies within it. And I think something that you mentioned in the beginning, it's if a consumer is making a decision based off brand, then they're going to go on the brand itself. But if they're making a more elaborate difficult decision, or it's higher priced, or there's more components to it, there's more of the education as well as the branding component to it. And then diving to who is ultimately making this decision and how can I empower, you know, those decision makers in order to take an action or the action that I want them to take. And it's pretty cool how you said the consumer journey and the buyer's journey as well as the challenger sale, right? So those two tools and frameworks, those are more frameworks that you can plug into your different sales processes depending on where you're at, your market, your industry, and what you're selling.
Yeah. I mean, essentially, you know, we work with a lot of people that generally have some great marketing tactics, but there's so many tactics out there and they don't know which ones to optimize, which ones to drop, which ones to start up. And these frameworks will help take them from step by step, going from a customer persona to a buyer's journey, being able to identify the weakest part of the chain and working on that. And then also what kind of messaging to deliver at what stage and in what channel.
In channel meaning if it's social, if it's video, if it's, you know, white paper.
Exactly. So generally, like some channels are going to be more likely to be awareness level channels for, you know, like social media, for example, whether it's for B2B or B2C, versus, you know, you're delivering something like a white paper or an ebook, you know, in a different channel, maybe from a trade show lead or an email nurture program, for example, once they're already sort of in your known lead universe.
Cool. And to keep the veil of, privacy still open, but do you have an example of a current client that you work with that was pretty exciting where you were able to apply some of these key frameworks and how you apply them to help them reach, a next level of success?
Yeah, most of them really. Yeah, we're working with right now actually a B2B SaaS provider,
Okay.
and they know tons about the industry, great instincts, right? And it's really just kind of about putting a little bit of more of a rigorous framework around it to move forward in a singular direction.
Interesting. So when it comes to, that means that they have industry experience, they already know what their customers want or how they think, but you're helping them. What are some of the like tangible ways that you support SaaS companies in that regard?
Well, I mean, really the steps are the customer interviews, creating the persona, creating the buyer's journey, developing metrics for their goals. And really actually that's a matter of selecting the correct metric for the question that they want to answer.
Interesting.
So, and the tricky part with that, and that's one in particular, this company that I'm thinking of, they definitely want metrics. But choosing the right metrics is important for a couple reasons. One, the metric has to actually answer, you don't want to be killed by, thousands of metrics, right? You want a few metrics that are going to answer the question. And you want to make sure everybody's driving it toward that same goal. So what metric is so you want to start with your hypothesis or the question that you want to answer, and then give the metric from that. You don't want to like look at a menu of metrics and just like start choosing one from each category. You want to say, okay, here's what we want to do, or here's the question we have. Do we have the right customer? Okay, so the way I'm going to answer that is, well, when you put out your let's say a Facebook ad or something, is that message about the problem statement that you're giving, is that resonating? Are people clicking on that, first of all? And then, so that would be one metric, is that top of funnel click, right? Are we, is our product trial successful? That might be a different metric for, a middle of the funnel metric, for example. So choosing the right metric, and then making sure that there's no perverse incentives. So if a team is working, if a team is working for a metric, you've got to think about what are the things they're going to do to make that metric.
Yeah, and some of the time, so that's actually, so let's rewind a bit, because I talked about this from Productive Profits on chapter 2, is that you have to marry soft metrics to hard metrics, and you can't just look a pile of data, because data by itself is meaningless. Right? With data by itself, it's not being used. If you're not asking the right questions, then it's just data sitting there. And if you don't know how to interpret it, and two people can interpret the same data different ways depending on the frame of view, the problems that you're trying to solve, and like you mentioned, what's the incentive? Because you might believe that, let's say, a gross example is companies for sales that just want to get sales quotas for that quarter. They might elicit activities that are not consumer friendly or customer friendly in order to reach those quotas, and then close accounts the next month or something like that. Right? Yeah, we've seen that with some companies. So it's key that you mention the motives behind it and the questions that need to be answered before you actually go about discovering what are the key performance indicators, but what are my key bottom line movers for the company that I care about, and how are we going, like, you obviously has to be a board of directors meeting or a leadership meeting, or at least a marketing team meeting. Like, what are the things that matter most for this goal, this initiative that we can both or all move towards?
Yeah, definitely.
So I want to back up a little bit and understand more of your journey of how you ended up here with Social Currency.
Sure. So back in 2010, I was working at a startup company that made consumer packaged goods. So we had a very niche product that was competing against Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Energizer, like the largest big brand companies, that you see in the drugstore, for example. We had a super innovative product that had super high customer loyalty. and we learned through trial and error how to win with that product and massively grow it 40% year over year,
Wow.
which is highest growth rate in the category for consumer packaged goods. That's very high. It's usually like single digit growth to none in this category or declining.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, it's pretty staid. So, we had worked with consultants from bigger companies to kind of come and tell us, here's, how you would do it in CPG, blah, blah, blah. But we found that the advice they gave us was really good for mature CPG companies looking to grow a certain category or something like that. But it wasn't relevant to this challenger brand in trying to do something totally different in a very uncertain market. So we took what we learned there and said, gee, someday we'd really like to come back and apply what we've learned to other companies. We also, when we were working there, had the opportunity to meet a lot of other startup brands who had like really cool products, but, just weren't really getting anywhere. And again, not because their innovation wasn't great, just because they had so much headwind from these large competitors, from, you have less space on the retail shelf than your larger competitors. You have less promo spend. There's all these, factors kind of working against you. So it said, if we could help a bunch of these companies, conquer that, like, how great would that be?
That's pretty epic.
Here we are.
What are some of so when I have an innovative brand or an innovative product, what are the key ingredients that you look for to actually compete and win against the big Goliaths? Because you mentioned like limiters, right? Less spend, huge headwinds from other competitors, but those are huge companies, like enormous compared to like the small brands. Like this is not even like this is like a David 10x Goliath, right? So what are some of the key indicators that you're looking for in brands or innovations that say, you know what, this has a chance to win? Here's how.
Yeah, we look for the problem that they're solving. Are they solving something that is enough of a problem for people to make a change in their behavior? And that's either B2B or B2C. So there's a problem and there's people who want to solve people experiencing that problem. Even better if you know who's experiencing that problem and you understand the context in which they're experiencing that problem. On the consumer side especially, we're also looking at trends. So in this case, in the company that we worked for, we were actually very early on the trend, maybe like a little too early, but there was a trend that we're seeing much more now towards people wanting natural, organic, clean care for everything in personal care, beauty, skincare, all that stuff. So, looking at the trends of the market, but also, you could be too early or too late. It's hard to predict when is the exact right time.
So it's pretty much going back to the basics. What's the major problem in your unique position? Who are you selling to? Is it a large enough market? But I like how you married that also to what's the trend happening, not only right now, but what's happening in 3 years, what's happening in 5 years, and when you can't really time the market, but when's the best time to introduce a new offering or a new product line?
Yeah, and even if you can't target the market, you can at least target the people. So are you targeting the early adopters? Like, at our time, when we were with this personal care product, we were targeting like people who were like really on the forefront. And so knowing where those people are
like
and who they are, that's key.
Interesting. What's the most fun product or project you've worked on?
That's hard to say. It's like choosing your favorite baby.
You don't have a favorite? I'm joking.
Well, the company that we worked at, that was a great project. That was a personal care product. And it was now it would be considered a very like clean kind of product, body friendly. It's for people in that, at that time it was kind of hippy dippy. And now it's like totally mainstream.
It's like cool.
So yeah, I mean, that was a lot of our marketing actually was really about taking this thing that was kind of weird and different. And like, people would kind of look at it like, huh? And now it's like totally normal, and part of that was we would advertise in more mainstream publications and get people to try it.
Interesting.
So that was a favorite. I'm actually working on just a straight up security, B2B security as a service project right now. That's doesn't sound as fun and exciting as like a consumer product, but it's actually super interesting to get into the mindset of the customer, and especially all the opportunities there are for growth. When I get in and I see like a clear path of like, okay, we can fix this and this and this, it's like super motivating.
That's exciting. No, that is pretty cool to always see the new trends in different industries. I know that this will be
and there's
gated.
a lot coming out right now. So we work with a lot of biotech clients.
Oh, really?
And that whole space is just changing incredibly rapidly. So, we worked on a direct-to-consumer genetic test, a line of genetic tests. That was really fun. But there's so much science out there with the science of the microbiome, what's being done in genetics and epigenetics. So that space is just exploding.
That's incredible. And I was going to actually ask about that. And this is obviously going to be outdated the time this is published. But what are some of the trends you're seeing right now in some of the major categories you're working in?
So for beauty, just clean, organic, being much more inclusive. So I think there was a reaction against this feeling that and this isn't just limited to beauty. This is a lot of consumer products.
Yeah.
I think consumers felt like they were put in boxes by these big companies. Like, I'm a suburban mom of 2, age 35 to 45, and this is what you want.
Oh, demographically.
Well, people are saying, demographically, and people are kind of saying no more. Like, in beauty, it's gone pretty radical. There's sort of like, let's not talk about genders, because men might want this, women might want this, people who don't identify with a gender want this. We want a shade for every color of skin tone. It's radically inclusive. And I think other market segments will probably be following that way as well. Part of it is the demographics are shifting that, because millennials are becoming the heavy buyers now. So Gen X is kind of, baby boomers are on their way out, although baby boomers are spending a lot of money. So for specific categories, they're extremely, critical. No one generation is the most important. Anyway, so we're seeing a lot of, I would say, like, consumers giving feedback to the brand, and it being almost more of a co-created brand rather than big brand telling consumer, here's what you want.
That's pretty co-created with like open feedbacks or surveys, or what do you mean by that?
Yeah. I mean, a great example of this is the beauty company Glossier.
Okay.
So it started out as a blog into the gloss. And then they started they got so much feedback on the blog about what people want, right? And then they started making those products. And so it was always sort of co-created, but then they developed this community, of their brand advocates. And they actually, I think they have like a huge Slack channel or something similar.
Oh, really?
And they are giving feedback to the company about what should be developed. That's literally how they develop products.
It's almost like crowdsourcing or like crowd information.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, Trace, I want to finish with this quick question, and might dive a little deeper too, is, the whole purpose of the podcast is to dive into excellence in different fields, different projects, different careers, different stories, different journeys. When you look at the term excellence, how do you see that reflect or mirror in the work that you're doing, or the work that your clients are doing?
I would say, the clients we're working with, we see a lot of passion, and they don't stop when they hit a roadblock. They've driven to understand all the time, driven to understand more and more about the problem that they're working on. And our job is just to kind of go in there and make a few tweaks to to clear obstacles from their path and help them focus, essentially. So I think it's really about not stopping when you have a question, and also not just sort of putting aside that question in your mind that is bugging you all the time, but being driven to answer that question.
So being driven, wow, by the curiosity. That's powerful.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. Awesome. So where can listeners go and connect with you after the show?
GetSocialCurrency.com is our website. You can email me, Tracey with an EY at GetSocialCurrency.com.
Awesome. Well, Tracey.
And we're on Instagram too.
There you go. Tracey, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.